Okay, I want to try a little experiment to kick things off today. I want you to close your eyes for a second. Seriously, just for a moment. Now, picture a Neanderthal. What's the very first image that pops into your brain?
I think I can guess where this is going. It's probably some hairy, hunched-over brute, right?
Right.
Maybe holding a big wooden club, looking a little dim-witted, maybe scratching his head.
Exactly. That is the cartoon we've all been sold since we were in kindergarten. The classic caveman.
The Oog and Ook characters.
Yes. But, and here's where it gets really interesting right off the bat. What if I told you that stereotype is not just a little bit wrong, but completely backwards?
It is a fascinating contradiction. I mean, we use the word Neanderthal as an insult for someone stupid or backward.
All the time.
Yet the source material we're looking at today points out a startling fact, like right on page 1. Neanderthal brains were actually as large as, and often larger than, modern human brains.
Which immediately makes you wonder, right? If they had the hardware, if they had that massive processing power, why do we treat them like they were barely functioning?
Exactly.
Today, we're going to fix that. We're doing a deep dive into the book Neanderthals. Modern Science Rewrites Their Story by Dimitri Paganni and Michael A. Morse. And I have to say, the context of how this book came to be is actually pretty charming.
It is. The authors, they mention in the preface that they wrote this book while expecting twins.
Wow.
And I think that framed their perspective in a really unique way. They weren't just looking at, dusty bones and stratigraphic layers. They were thinking about lineage, about survival.
About the lengths parents go to keep their children alive in a hostile world.
Yes. It changes the vibe completely. They treat the Neanderthal story not as a failed prequel to us or some rough draft that didn't make the cut,
but as a success story in its own right.
That's really the key shift. Yeah. We usually define them by their extinction.
Yeah.
But for hundreds of thousands of years, they were the absolute masters of Europe.
Mm-hmm. So that's our mission today. We are going to strip away the cartoons and the insults. We're going to look at the rehabilitation, if you will, of the Neanderthal reputation.
Because the reality is, these guys ruled a world we can barely imagine.
But before we get to their tools and their survival, we have to talk about their name because, honestly, it might be the biggest cosmic joke in the history of science.
It really is. It's one of those ironies that is almost too perfect to be true. To understand it, we have to go back to 1856, Germany.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So, workers are clearing out a limestone cave in a valley. They find these bones. Now, at the time, nobody's thinking ancient human species.
Right.
They think maybe this is a bear or, maybe a lost Cossack soldier from the Napoleonic Wars. But the valley itself, that's where the story gets good.
Right. The valley was named the Neander Valley, or Neanderthal in German.
Exactly. But why was it called that?
Yeah.
It was named after a man, Joachim Neumann. He was a hymn writer, a rector in the late 1600s, and he used to wander those cliffs and valleys looking for inspiration for his music.
Okay, so Neumann, pretty standard German name. I don't see the joke yet.
Here's the trick. In the 17th century, it was incredibly trendy for scholars and artists to Greekify their names to sound more intellectual.
Wait.
Neumann literally means new man in German, so he translated it to Greek. New man in Greek is Neander.
Wait, so Neander literally means new man.
Yes, and Thal simply means valley.
So Neanderthal literally translates to Valley of the New Man.
Can you believe it?
That is incredible. We discovered this ancient, extinct species of human, the first one we ever really identified, and we accidentally found them in a place literally named Valley of the New Man.
It's deeply ironic. It's like the universe was trying to give us a hint. But unfortunately, that new man label didn't come with much respect.
No, not at all.
Initially, they weren't even recognized as a species. It wasn't until William King, a professor in Ireland around 1863, looked at the skull and said, no, this is distinct. This is a different species.
But even King, who gave them the credit of being a species, he didn't exactly think highly of them, did he? I was reading his notes in the source material, and he was pretty brutal.
He was. He thought they were much closer to chimpanzees. He actually suggested they were, quote, uncivilized and incapable of moral or theistic thoughts.
He just looked at the heavy brow ridge and the shape of the skull and essentially decided they were brutes.
And that legacy stuck.
It really did. Even today, the authors point out how we use the term. There was a New York Times critic who called bad antisocial television characters Neanderthal television.
Or the rock band.
Yeah.
The source mentions a band called the Neanderthals who dress in animal skins and sing simple songs about girls.
It's just shorthand for primitive or stupid.
Which is wildly unfair when you look at the archaeological record presented in the book. I mean, this was not a species of brutes. The rehabilitation effort in this book shows us the reality was so much more complex.
For one, they buried their dead.
That is a massive behavioral marker. Burying the dead implies a concept of the afterlife, or at the very least, deep emotional bonding and respect. You don't see that in the animal kingdom, generally.
And the healthcare aspect blew my mind.
It's profound, isn't it? We find skeletons of Neanderthals who had severe, debilitating injuries, withered arms, missing eyes, healed fractures.
Injuries that would make it impossible to hunt.
Absolutely. And yet the bones show that they lived for years after those injuries.
Which means someone was feeding them.
Someone was feeding them, protecting them, moving them when the group moved. That is compassion. That is humanity in the deepest sense of the word.
And the diet, too. We think of them just eating mammoth steaks, but the book mentions they ate seafood.
Yeah, shellfish and fish.
That implies a level of adaptability we don't usually give them credit for.
Absolutely. They survived massive climate shifts that would have likely wiped us out if we were in their shoes without our modern technology. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving in a hostile Europe for a very, very long time.
Speaking of thriving in Europe, let's look at the timeline, because I think people assume humans evolved in Africa, popped over to Europe, and boom, Neanderthal.
Right, like it was a straight line.
But it was a much longer, messier process.
It was. Humans, or hominins, were actually late to Europe. We were in Asia much earlier. But Europe was tough. We're talking about a timeline stretching back 1 million years. The authors described this period as a series of false starts.
Who were the first ones to actually try to settle Europe? The pioneers.
We call them Homo antecessor, the pioneer. And the evidence for them comes from some spectacular sites in Spain, specifically the Atapuerca Mountains.
Atapuerca seems to be the gift that keeps on giving for archaeologists.
It is the gold standard. You have two key sites there, Cima del Elefante and Grandolina. At Cima del Elefante, we're talking fossils dating back over 1 million years.
Wow.
But Grandolina, which is about 960,000 years old, provided a discovery that was, well, it was shocking.
You're talking about the cannibalism?
Yes. They found human bones mixed in with animal bones. Bison, deer. And the human bones had the exact same cut marks on them. They were butchered.
Processed for food.
They were processed for food.
Now, this is where it gets tricky, because it's so easy to hear cannibalism and go right back to that savage caveman stereotype. See? They were monsters.
Of course.
But I know you're going to tell me to look at the context.
You know me well. We ought to be careful with judgment. The authors make a very important comparison here. They reference the 4 people of Papua New Guinea, or
even the Andes flight survivors from the 1970s, the rugby team.
Exactly that, where they had to make an impossible choice to survive.
Right.
Cannibalism isn't always about savagery. In the case of Homo antecessor, it appears to be nutritional cannibalism.
Nutritional cannibalism, so starvation.
Likely starvation, or maybe competition. This was a hard world. They were pioneering a new continent. Resources were scarce. It wasn't necessarily ritualistic cruelty. It was distinct desperation, a survival strategy. It makes them more human in a tragic way, not less.
So let's move north, away from the grim discoveries in Spain, up to the UK. Because the source mentions sites in England, Pakefield, and Happisburgh, that completely rewrote the timeline for how far north these early humans could go.
This is truly rewriting the textbooks. For a long time, we didn't think humans were in Britain that early.
Right.
We're talking 700,000 to maybe 900,000 years ago.
That's amazing.
But what I love about this story is how they dated these sites. It wasn't just carbon-14.
Oh, this is my favorite detail in the whole deep dive. The vole clock.
The vole clock. It's such a brilliant cocktail party fact.
It really is.
So there was this specific type of water vole, an extinct species called Mammomi savini. These voles evolved very rapidly, specifically their teeth. Their molars changed shape at a very predictable rate over time.
So if you find a vole tooth next to a stone tool,
You can tell exactly when that tool was dropped based on the shape of the vole's tooth. It's incredibly precise for this time scale.
wow.
And because of this vole clock, we know humans were in England way, way earlier than we thought.
And the England they were living in. It wasn't the rainy, gray England of today, was it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
The fossils tell us they were living alongside hippos, rhinos, and elephants
In England.
in England. It was a lush, warm, diverse environment during the interglacial periods.
Mm-hmm.
It would have looked more like the Serengeti than Suffolk.
So that was the first wave, the pioneers. But they didn't seemingly last. They sort of faded out.
Or retreated, yeah.
Then comes the second wave, the group that would eventually become the Neanderthals.
Enter Homo heidelbergensis.
Yeah.
You can think of them as the grandfather species. They show up around 600,000 years ago, and they brought something with them that changed everything.
The hand axe.
The hand axe.
The hand axe.
The Swiss Army knife of the Paleolithic.
That's what they call it.
Exactly. The Acheulean hand axe. It's a teardrop-shaped stone tool. Symmetrical, beautifully made. It was used for butchery, skinning, digging, everything. But here's the mystery. This technology had been in Africa for a very long time.
Right.
It took hundreds of thousands of years to get to Europe.
Why the delay? I mean, if it was such great tech, why didn't it travel faster?
Isolation. The source emphasizes that Europe was cut off. It wasn't easy to get into. So when Heidelbergensis finally arrives with this tech, it's a game changer. And we see the power of this technology at a site called Boxgrove in the UK.
Boxgrove. The authors call this the Paleolithic Pompeii. That's a big claim to live up to.
It earns the title. Imagine a lagoon 500,000 years ago. The tide goes out, leaving a muddy expanse.
Okay.
A group of these humans, Heidelbergensis, kill a horse. They sit down to butcher it. They make their tools right there on the spot, nabbing the flint. They strip the meat.
Yeah.
And then the tide comes back in,
And covers everything.
gently covers it with silt. It preserved that specific moment in time. Archaeologists can literally see where a person sat, the pile of flint chips, the debitage between their legs where they made the tool.
No will.
You can see the outline of their legs and the scatter pattern. It's a 15-minute window into the past, preserved for 500,000 years.
That is mind-blowing. It's so intimate, you can almost hear the chipping of the stone.
And it proves they were organized. They were just scavenging leftovers from lions. They were hunting prime animals, processing them efficiently and moving on. This was a sophisticated species.
So Heidelbergensis is doing well. They have the tools, they have the hunting skills, but then the world starts to change. And this is where the Neanderthal story really begins, the transition.
The climate engine. This is the crucial why. Why did Heidelbergensis in Europe turn into Neanderthals while their cousins in Africa turned into us?
It's all about the ice.
It's the ice ages, driven by what we call Milankovitch cycles.
Okay, let's unpack that. Milankovitch cycles. Sounds complicated.
It sounds fancy, but it's actually just the rhythm of the Earth. It's about three things: the shape of the Earth's orbit around the sun, the tilt of its axis, and its wobble.
Okay.
These three things fluctuate over tens of thousands of years. When they line up in a certain way, the northern hemisphere gets less summer sun.
So the snow doesn't melt.
Exactly. It builds up year after year. Ice sheets grow, and Europe gets locked in the freezer.
And more importantly, it gets locked out.
Yes. The expanding ice sheets and the changing sea levels effectively cut Europe off from the rest of the world. The population trapped there couldn't just migrate south to Africa. They were stuck.
Isolation.
Total isolation. So, while our ancestors in Africa were adapting to the heat, becoming tall and lean to dissipate heat.
The Europeans were adapting to the cold.
Right.
So the classic Neanderthal look, the stocky body, the short limbs, that's not because they were primitive or clunky. That's high-level biological engineering.
Exactly. It's heat retention. Think of a sphere. It has the least surface area for its volume. A stocky body holds heat better. Short limbs mean less heat loss. Even their faces. The source mentions those large noses.
I always wondered about the big noses. I thought maybe it was just a random genetic drift.
No, it's a radiator system, or really a humidifier. A large internal nasal cavity helps warm and humidify the cold, dry air before it hits the sensitive lungs.
They were built for the Ice Age.
Every part of them was designed to survive in a place that wanted to kill them.
So around 250,000 years ago, this process is complete. The Heidelbergensis in Europe has officially morphed into the Neanderthal.
They are a distinct species, forged by the cold.
And successful.
And successful. That's what we have to remember. They lived through cycles of brutal cold that would have broken us. They mastered their environment. They developed tools, culture, and survival strategies that last for hundreds of thousands of years.
It really changes how you look at them. They weren't a failed attempt at humanity. They were the specialized European model.
Perfectly stated. And if we look at the big picture, the story of Europe wasn't this empty stage waiting for us to arrive. It was a dynamic, dangerous place. You had the antecessor pioneers who tried and failed. You had Heidelbergensis who adapted. And then you had the Neanderthals who perfected that adaptation.
It reminds us that for the vast majority of human history, we weren't alone.
That's the most profound takeaway for me. We look around today and we are the only human species. We think that's normal. It's not. We are the outliers. For most of time, there were multiple ways to be human existing simultaneously.
The source ends with a really provocative thought that I can't stop thinking about. We know Neanderthals vanished roughly around the time the climate finally stabilized into the Holocene period, the warm, stable period we live in now.
Right. They were the masters of the unstable, cold world.
So the authors ask, if the weather hadn't turned stable, if the chaos had continued, would we have survived, or would the Neanderthals still be here?
It raises the question, are we the inevitable winners because we're smarter? Or are we just the ones who got lucky with the weather? If the ice ages had continued, perhaps it'd be Neanderthals sitting in a studio right now, discussing the fascinating, extinct, tall, skinny humans from Africa who couldn't handle the cold.
A humbling thought. Maybe we aren't the crown of creation, just the beneficiaries of a long summer.
It certainly makes you appreciate the air conditioning a little more.
It does. Thank you for listening to this deep dive into Neanderthals. We hope you look at our ancient cousins a little differently now, not as brutes, but as the survivors of the ice.
Keep questioning the stereotypes.
See you next time.